Good morning, members of the media and viewers and listeners. The purpose of this press conference is to discuss issues relating to the constitutional reform process and where it has now reached, which have been in the media over the past week or so. The matter at hand is one of intergenerational importance to our country. Jamaicans will have to live under the new constitution for generations to come. We have a solemn duty to ensure that the new constitution is appropriately balanced and will protect the rights of our people and the democracy that guarantees our freedoms. Therefore, due care and attention must be given to the proposed changes that will be put into any new constitution. And as the opposition, we have a particular responsibility to be vigilant in this regard. The process of reform must be fully open and transparent. The Constitutional Reform Committee, or CRC, has issued a report, and it must be immediately shared with the public. It cannot be hidden away and only known by its members and by the inner reaches of government. Indeed, the public should have been empowered to review and comment on the reform proposals as detailed in that report, so that the public's views on the specific proposals could be considered by the committee before the report was sent to Cabinet. In my view, the entire reform process has been flawed. It should have been preceded by intense public education on the existing constitution so that the people of Jamaica would have been informed as to what now exists and where the changes ought to come. The reform process should have been genuinely open to a fresh look at the kind of constitution that Jamaicans want to have in the 21st century, rather than limiting ourselves to positions that were agreed some 30 years ago in the 1990s. The terms of reference of the reform should themselves have been open to consultation and consensus, rather than being narrowly dictated by the government. As a result of how it's happened, the decision made by the government to implement positions agreed by the two political parties some 30 years ago, when Jamaicans who are now up to 50 years old had no role in or awareness of those discussions, is an untenable process for seeking engagement and participation in the new constitution by our people. As a result, the reality is that the public consultations which have occurred have really had little significant impact on the contents of the proposals in the CRC report, which has gone to Cabinet yesterday for approval. The wide-ranging desires and concerns of the public for Jamaica's constitution have not found their way into any significant reform proposals in that document. From the outset, back in June or July of 2022, before any Constitutional Reform Committee was appointed, I wrote to the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs to make it clear to the government that for us in the People's National Party, final and full decolonization is a fundamental issue of access to justice for the Jamaican people and of national sovereignty. I have been open and consistent on this position throughout the process since then. Indeed, it is not a Mark Golding position. It is a position of the People's National Party. And we have been consistently trying to move Jamaica in this direction for decades, as you know. Our position is that time come to leave the British monarchy in full, once and for all. When Jamaica is moving out of the King's Yard, we cannot have 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the yard. That would leave us neither fish nor fowl in another man's yard. That can't work. We will not support a phased approach to dealing with the matter of full decolonization, because the phased approach does not guarantee its attainment. It may never happen if we do it that way. The arrangements for access to our people's final court need to get away from visa requirements. We need to get away from rules of court that are in conflict with and whittle down our constitutional rights of appeal. We need to get away from the exorbitant costs of appealing to a final court in London. Ladies and gentlemen, an appeal to the final court can cost taxpayers of Jamaica, in a case involving the government, of over $130 million for one appeal. That is unsustainable and a waste of taxpayers' resources, given where we are in terms of our institutional arrangements regionally. We must move away from having our Constitution interpreted by a colonial-era court comprised of judges in the UK who have no first-hand knowledge of Jamaican culture and conditions. We must move with full confidence in the Caribbean Court of Justice. It is an institution of excellence that has been designed to be both independent of political influence and accessible to our people at an affordable cost. It is a regional institution that Jamaica helped to design and establish. It is fully funded by a trust fund to ensure its protection from external influences. And our people, the Jamaican people, helped to pay for that trust fund. Jamaica is still awaiting Prime Minister Andrew Holness's clear position on the issue of moving away from the Privy Council to the Caribbean Court of Justice as our final court of appeal. From last October, the minister promised that Mr. Holness would soon be making a statement clarifying his position and the government's position on this. 3 weeks ago, I discussed the matter with Mr. Holness behind the Speaker's chair in Parliament, and he said he would be considering the matter, which he understood to be of great importance to us, and that he would let us know where he stands. I didn't hear from him, and I wrote to him a week ago, once again requesting him to make his position known. Jamaica still has not heard from its Prime Minister on this fundamental issue. Ladies and gentlemen, the People's National Party cannot sign off on a report that does not facilitate us moving forward with a bipartisan approach based on consensus around the new Constitution. We as opposition are also concerned about several of the reform proposals that are in the CRC report that has been taken to Cabinet, which we regard as problematic in several respects. And I will mention some of those now. As it stands, the report would enable the government of the day, and this is not about the current government or a future government. This is any government going forward once we have a new constitution. The report would enable the government of the day to use its majority in Parliament to install a president, head of state of the government's choosing, in circumstances where there is no consensus with the opposition as to the appointment of that individual as president. This is unacceptable. The president has important powers making appointments to sensitive positions within the government and the state, and also ceremonial duties as a figure of national unity. It is vital that the president must be someone who enjoys the trust and confidence of both political parties and the wider public. The report would allow the government of the day to use its majority to extend the life of Parliament beyond 5 years. Again, we do not think any government should have that power. on its own. The report does nothing to strengthen accountability within Parliament. It expressly rejects the introduction of an impeachment procedure for parliamentarians whose misconduct brings that office into disrepute. Despite an impeachment bill having been developed and tabled in Parliament by the Bruce Golding government, although they never passed it at the time, despite the passage of an impeachment bill being an unfulfilled JLP manifesto commitment from 2016, and despite an updated impeachment bill having been tabled by me as leader of the opposition in Parliament in 2021. Despite these things, the report is saying there should be no impeachment procedure in the new Constitution. The report also does nothing to end majority party control of important parliamentary committees, which should be for providing checks and balances to hold the government to account for its conduct of the nation's business, but as it stands today, are dominated by the government side. As it stands today, most of these committees are controlled and managed by government MPs, with the opposition only having a very small presence and not appointing the chairman. This report does nothing about that. The report also does not deal with long-standing issues of concern to important stakeholders. The desire for engagement and participation by Jamaicans in the diaspora who support our country's national development in critical ways, financially and otherwise. It does nothing to recognize the rights of indigenous groups such as the Maroons and the Rastafari community. These things have not been addressed in the report, despite being matters of real concern to many Jamaicans. Ladies and gentlemen, the rush to take this report to Cabinet without allowing the committee to deliberate on these important issues raised by the opposition in my comments sent last week Friday via Minister Hilton to the minister who co-chairs that committee shows that the government has no genuine desire to achieve consensus on the contents of the new Constitution. As can be expected, the government is now seeking to shift blame to us as the opposition for the government's failure to engage authentically with the opposition to identify a common pathway forward. The public should not be hoodwinked by what is being said in the media today. We have been responsible. We have sought to participate genuinely in the process. We have very real concerns about some of the contents of the report, and we have a fundamental issue which is at the core of our party's philosophy, which needs to be addressed, and we need to hear from the Prime Minister if we are to move forward together. As I have said, this matter will govern generations to come, and we must allow and follow our conscience and do what we believe to be right by the Jamaican people. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
So I want to say to all of you, to the media here present, and those of you Jamaicans who are watching this broadcast, that the People's National Party is totally committed to the process of constitutional reform. It was Michael Manley who in 1977 established a division under the Minister of Justice for exactly that purpose. And as a young woman, I was one of those persons who went to the highways and the byways, to church halls, to schools, discussing with the people how they wanted to see their constitution emerge and getting their views on what a new constitution should look like. At that time, it was very clear that our emphasis was on delinking from the monarchy and recognizing ourselves as a true, proud Jamaican nation. Now, this reform process on which we have embarked sets as the framework the 1995 commitments from that Joint Select Committee. There have been issues raised about that. The young people, and I speak to a lot of them, complain that they were not born then and that they would like to have a say, and I think that is very important. But I will also point out that even then, that committee understood that we had to leave the Privy Council and that once we had a regional court, that court should become our final court of appeal, our apex court. So let us now look at the sequence that has led us to speaking to you today. From June last year, the leader of opposition made it clear that he was not going to participate in any committee unless we had an agreement about the CCJ.
June 2022.
June 2022. Yeah. And no members were named. In an attempt to resolve it, a Vale Royal talk was organized by the church. The church was really, we had it at church premises, yeah. Leader, you'll recall. Yeah. And they were instrumental in bringing us together. That meeting was very fruitful, and we left with the leader of opposition appointing myself and Anthony to sit on the committee and appointing Hugh Small as a nominee.
We recommended him to them. Yeah.
So that I make this point because I want to show what discussions can do to arriving at consensus and how problems which look insurmountable can be overcome if we are willing to talk. And in this matter, I called at a public consultation in Mandeville in May 17th. I invited the Jamaica Labour Party, the government, to say what was their opposition to the CCJ and why it was that they wanted to remain with the Privy Council. And that is important. On October 3rd, when the minister addressed Parliament, she acknowledged the challenges in remaining as part of a court where you had to get a visa to attend. She said it was untenable, and she committed that the Prime Minister would have spoken to the nation on October 30. That has not happened. At the CRC, we have maintained that for us, the inclusion of the CCJ in this first phase is non-negotiable. And for the people of the country, it appears as though it is also non-negotiable, because a recent poll has shown that 58.9% of the people also want the CCJ as their final court of appeal. Now, the leader of opposition has had dialogue behind the Speaker's chair with the Prime Minister, and he has acknowledged the view that it is important to the opposition that we discuss the CCJ. But nothing has happened. And my consistent request is, let's talk about it. Let Jamaica understand why it is that you are so fixed in that position that you don't want to even talk about the CCJ, which has been in existence for 20 years. It has an excellent reputation. Its judgments have withstood all kinds of scrutiny. There has been no allegation of any impropriety on any part of any judge. I will also say this finally. You know, you put me before a mic and you don't give me a time limit, and it becomes a bit problematic, Anthony. But I will also say this. It is not conceivable to me that we could be at a table representing the People's National Party and not have the opportunity to discuss what is going into this report with the leader and the representatives. He has a team with whom he works. And I made it very clear when I saw that we were supposed to sign off on the draft report from April 10th. I made it very clear that we do not function like this, and that our team would have to look at the report scrutinize it, and approve it in order for us to sign. That, to me, is how it should be. And indeed, in my view, this report, which has gone to cabinet, should have been widely distributed so that the country can see what it is recommending.
That's right.
Because it is supposed to be the consultations with the people which has led to the drafting of this report. It is their document. In the very same way, the Constitution of a Republic of Jamaica should be a document for the people. It is the people who will have to vote to make it become a reality. Thank you.
It's been a year since Prime Minister Andrew Holness named a 14-member Constitutional Reform Committee to guide the process of overhauling Jamaica's constitutional arrangements. The work of the committee has come in for much criticism. Civil society groups have called for more transparency and broader consultation on the matters under consideration. Despite those hurdles, co-chair of the committee and Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Marlene Malahoo Fort, announced that the body had come to a consensus on the way forward and would be making its recommendations to Cabinet. But in a letter dated May 7, 2024, addressed to Prime Minister Andrew Holness, Mark Golding has indicated he's not prepared to play ball. He has instructed Donna Scott Motley and Anthony Hilton not to sign off on the recommendations of the committee. The two have been members of the body for 12 months and have been part of the deliberations on its work. Mr. Golding told the Prime Minister that unless the move from the British monarchy is paired with leaving the London-based Privy Council, the opposition would not approve the document. The PNP president also told the Prime Minister that leaving the Privy Council is a fundamental issue for his party. Mr. Golding says coupling the removal of the British monarch with accepting the Caribbean Court of Justice would allow the country to proceed on its constitutional reform process in a bipartisan manner that embraces what he describes as full decolonization. The report is shortly to be presented to the Cabinet for approval. Mr. Golding further told the Prime Minister that there are other issues in the final report that are of concern to the parliamentary opposition. He says those concerns will be shared with the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Marlene Malahoo Fort. Mr. Golding did not outline them in his letter. The full contents of the report of the Constitutional Reform Committee have not been made public. Norige Banton for Nationwide News.
We all seem to agree that we need to end the reign of the monarchy as a head of the Jamaican state. We all seem to agree on that. In the latest iteration of constitutional reform, we set up a constitutional reform committee with a membership drawn from both political parties and wider civil society. And if there's one thing we all seem to agree on, is that we must end the reign of the British monarchy as a titular head of the Jamaican state. Now we're learning from the opposition leader that he's not prepared to sign off on that. He wants to twin it with the more contentious issue, the issue that has divided the country, and that issue being what should be our apex court or court of final appeal. Should we stick with the Privy Council or should we go with the Caribbean Court of Justice that we have been instrumental in establishing and financing for more than 2 decades now? But it remains contentious. Contentious. there's no consensus on whether we should stick with the Privy Council or go with the CCJ. And we have been debating that now for a long time. So much so that it is my understanding that we decided that, listen, we're going to push ahead with what there's consensus on. And the consensus is end the British monarchy as the head of state of Jamaica. We're going to go republic. There was an issue of whether we should go for an executive president or a ceremonial president. That delayed us for several years. Now we seem to have settled that we will go the route of the ceremonial head of state, with some powers, limited. And now Mr. Golding is saying that, listen, not even the push, the agreement to go with a Jamaican republic, he's prepared to sign off on. On Friday, Mr. Golding said his party will not sign the document, the draft document from the Constitutional Reform Committee, unless the contentious issue of Jamaica adopting the Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ, is settled. What does that mean, given the contention? It means, in practical terms, we will be delayed again for another 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Huh? Because there's no consensus on that. And I don't want to start going into the debate and the arguments for and against the CCJ, because that is well ventilated. But frankly, when I heard the story on Friday, I was taken aback, because it was pretty much agreed that we know the PNP's position. The PNP has been very consistent. Yes, very consistent on us acceding to the jurisdiction of the CCJ. The JLP has waffled on that. Yeah? But the PNP has been very consistent. But there's division in the country, even within its own ranks, that's the PNP, over whether we should go the route of the CCJ or stay put with the Privy Council. So what is Mr. Golding saying now? For as long as it takes to settle the differences over the CCJ, we will continue to be a British colonial, post-colonial outpost where His Majesty the King will continue to be the head of state of Jamaica. That's what it means in practical terms. Mr. Golding should understand that these matters are difficult matters. And in the cut and thrust of a competitive democracy such as ours, you can play your card, you know. And my own take is that he's feeling his oats. He's in the political ascendancy. And he's wanting to flex his political muscles or perceptions of political strength. But don't forget, in our politics, there are ebbs and flows. Tides rise and fall. So don't push it. Yeah? We're not an authoritarian command state where you're going to dictate terms, where you're going to decide what happens, when, how, where. That's not the kind of democracy we are, sir. And if there's consensus that we go to the Republican status of Jamaica. Why delay that? Because we're not going the route yet of the CCJ. I think it is raw politics he's playing, and he must be called out for it. Raw politics. There's consensus on one thing. Let's do that and continue the agitation, the lobby for the CCJ. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Well, despite Mr. Golding's insistence that his party will not sign off on the Constitutional Reform Committee recommendations until the issue of the CCJ is settled and twinned to it, the minister leading the process in terms of ministerial responsibility, Marlene Malahoo Fort, she was very measured in her response. Very measured. She said that she remains hopeful that there will be consensus on the report. Here's Dana Davis' report on Mrs. Malahoo Fort's response.
Marlene Malahoo Fort is undeterred by Mark Golding's threat to withhold his support. She says the work must go on.
The CRC process has been worthwhile, and we have made great progress so far. But the work must continue until the task is done. While consensus of the government and opposition is a required step to advance reform of the deeply entrenched provisions, ultimately it is the people of Jamaica who will decide.
The minister says the report to be submitted to Cabinet contains only recommendations which received the full support of the committee members.
It is regrettable that the leader of the opposition has instructed his representatives on the committee not to sign the report, even though the report includes only those recommendations to which all members of the committee agreed.
In his letter to the Prime Minister announcing that his party's representatives would not sign the document, Mr. Golding appeared to suggest that Donna Scott Motley and Anthony Hilton did not have the authority to approve any recommendations on their own. Minister Malahoo Fort is maintaining that the work of the Reform Committee will be done in phases. According to the government's expressed timeline, the matter of the country's final appellate court will be dealt with in phase 2 of the process. The opposition leader is insisting that it be handled in phase 1, along with the question of replacing the monarchy. The minister is urging all Jamaicans to make their voice heard when the matter is put to a referendum. She says she remains hopeful.
It is the hope of the CRC that when the time comes, all eligible Jamaican voters will turn out and demonstrate that it is not about political preferences, but that you, the people, want a definitive say in our governance arrangements. I'm hopeful, I'm really hopeful that both government and opposition can work together to help create the Republic of Jamaica.
Dana Davey for Nationwide News.
I think Minister Malahoo Fort's response is commendable. Classy, and she's reading the room well. She's reading the room well. This is an issue that we have made very little progress on over the last 62 years. 1. 2, it is an issue that we need to maximize agreement on as a people. It is not an issue to flex political muscle and to ram it through based on whatever numbers you may have, or perceived weakness or strength. No. And we need to say to Mark Golding this morning, What have you done to the members representing the opposition and the CRC? You have emasculated them. You have really reduced them to being observers. Because of what value is their contribution if, having participated as they have, and there is agreement among all the members, you then turn around and cut them off at the knees, huh? On a matter that has a long trajectory, long history of disagreements. You don't do that. That's not leadership. That's bullying. And that's not helpful. Marlene Malahoo Fort's response shows maturity. Maturity